Alright guys, back with another video today, like I said it would be, and I promised to do just a quick breakdown of this lens that I've had for 4 years, so finally do that. This lens is the Vivitar Series 1 70 to 210. It's a constant 3.5 aperture all the way through the zoom, all the way through the focal range, which is really cool. I mean, most kit lenses you get are variable zoom. Sorry, let me say that again correctly. Most zoom lenses you get, cheaper zoom lenses, are variable aperture, meaning as you move through the zoom range, the widest aperture generally will go down. So this lens was produced in the 80s. The original version of this was created in 1973, actually. But that was produced by a different manufacturer called Kino Precision, which went on to be called Chiron. So this particular version is the second version that was manufactured by Tokino, which a lot of people might know. It's a Japanese camera equipment manufacturer, and it was from 1981 to 1983. So just like the first version, this has the constant 3.5 aperture. As this moved on, the third version, which was made from 1984 to 86, made by a company called Komine or Komine, and it had a variable aperture. It had a wide aperture of f2.8, but then it would go down to f4 as you zoomed. That's still not bad. That's not a huge difference. And then from 1987 to the 90s, Cosina made the final version of this lens, which had that same 2.8 to f4 aperture. So when Vivitar released this, they wanted to make a zoom lens that could do a macro focus. So like those two 80s zoom lenses we looked at last week, those had a macro function of about 1 to 4, 1 to 5, whatever was the three of them. The Gemini lens was 1 to 4. This also has macro focusing of 1 to 4 capability, and it's in fact the first macro focusing zoom lens ever produced. Not this one, obviously, the original version, but this is the second version of the first macro focusing zoom lens ever produced. So it had a dedicated macro mode, and the original version, you would turn the ring, and just like the Gemini, you would press the button and turn it. On this version, you don't have to do that. You just turn it to the macro setting. And I had a little bit of trouble getting it to macro, but that's what I realized I had to look at this. Your macro focusing is 4 feet. So it's still, I mean, it's a little strange. You do get really good, like, high, like, detail shots, and you can get really right in close. But it's macro. You know, you have to be pretty far away. So upon release of the original lens, got a bunch of glowing reviews from Popular Mechanics, which it was called a remarkable accomplishment. Modern Photography called it a practical, usable lens, and there is no superior. So at the time, state of the art. The Series 1 line was Vivitar's premium series, designed to compete with the best lenses from Nikon and Canon. And this was kind of one of the ones that set them apart, because they had the first one that could do that. So it's interesting to see a third-party camera gear manufacturer really wanted to reach those prestige premium camera users. Yeah, it's known for being sharp, especially sharp at f8. We're going to take a look at samples here. Yeah, this thing is heavy, as are a lot of these vintage lenses. It's all metal and glass, about 2 pounds, and like you can imagine this on a small mirrorless. It's not exactly, you know, an even. I mean, that'll unbalance you pretty heavily. It doesn't have like any tripod attachment points here, like a lot of modern premium zooms do, because they're so big. Yeah, so if you go to 210 and twist to there, that's how you get to the macro. This is the zoom function here, and you can see it will just slide down, and if you hold it the other way, it does move around quite a bit. But that's good. The fact that it's easy to move means you can quickly zoom, like focus, zoom in, get your focus right. It can work. Yeah, so this particular one made between 81 and 83, constant 3.5. The first version had a 1 to 2 macro, and this one has the 1 to 4. What are you gonna do? Vivitar marketed this specific version with the slogan, think of it as 141 of the finest lenses that you can buy. And by that, they mean you've got every focal length between 70 and 210 plus a macro function. Yeah, I mean, it very versatile, totally usable lens. This Tokina version is known to be sharp, which we'll see. Sharpest when stopped down to 5.6 or 5.8 or to f. Didn't like I said, this one doesn't have the separate button for macro mode. It's a little bit more convenient. You know, we'll try and get some show some macro. As a constant aperture telephoto, it can produce nice background blur. Got some bokeh, the out of focus area. It's kind of got a swirly bokeh, kind of interesting. It's huge. Like it compared to modern super zooms, kind of things like that. This is small, compact, but it's still heavy. And it's big for the time. It's big for any of my cameras, really. It does show some chromatic aberration, which we'll look at. You can take that out in post-processing, but just to be aware of. So let's pull open Lightroom and we'll just take a look at some photos. Here's Tanji. He was being not cooperative. So this was at, I believe, wide open. You know, fairly sharp. Definitely see some of that fringing right around here. Like I said, literally in Lightroom, there's a button for it, so you can take that out. Or you can just press that button. But yeah, fairly sharp. A little bit of vignetting here in the corners. You can see kind of what I'm talking about with this somewhat swirly out of focus area here. So this is stopped down to, I think, 5.6. Look at, I mean, that's a little bit, didn't quite get that same angle. So look at that's going crazy. There's a cat. All right, again, some vignetting here. And this is wide open, but fairly sharp. You can see there's a little bit loss of contrast, but that could have just been the light at that time. Look at that vignetting. And then I think this is actually stopped down. Okay, so here's kind of a landscape kind of situation. What I really like about the big zoom range is you can kind of compress the background there. So, and you can see, you know, still getting some chromatic aberration, especially far away, especially from these point light sources. The sun was shining directly on the lens, so it's a little bit of loss of contrast there. But when it's in focus, it's really in focus. But you can see everything's just a little off here. I was focusing on the mountain. Let's just apply a little exactly what I'm looking for. And then here's one where there's not quite a lens, as much of a lens flare. I think I nailed focus a bit more on this one. I mean, even cropped in, this is on my full frame A7 II. I mean, these are readable. You can totally see that these are cars, and there's the mountain. I mean, detail on the mountain, it's pretty great. So again, this is like, I'm probably a few yards away from this, so zoomed out, fairly sharp. It's a little muddy I'm having to manual focus this, so this is wide open, so probably the center of the image is probably the sharpest, and then moving away. But that looks pretty good. I think this is just mold. This isn't chromatic aberration, I'm pretty sure. You can see as we get here, starts to get a little smeary. And then again, this out of focus area. This one I totally misfocused. This one's closer. And again, you know, this is the macro. If you're doing the macro, you're gonna need a tripod. You're just gonna need a tripod. It is so hard to keep focus and hold this huge heavy lens. So this is kind of just a wide. It's at the 70. Really good sharpness throughout. A little bit of that chromatic aberration again here. Here this is wide open. I can't really tell if there's vignetting there. Not totally super sharp, but usable. Okay, here's macro again, and again I had to be like 4 feet away to get anything in focus, but that looks pretty in focus to me, and you get pretty good detail. Fairly nice and sharp. You can crop right in. A little bit of that swirl in the out of focus area. Again, tiny bit of vignetting it looks like, but it doesn't look bad. All right, here's a tree from, I don't know exactly my focal length here, but sharpen it up a little bit. Yeah, you can see it's not a lot of contrast. I mean, not a super contrasty lens in this situation, which is, you know, I'm in the woods, so diffuse light, not having light directly on the lens. I don't see much vignetting here, and maintains pretty much the same sharpness throughout that image, so, you know, can't be too upset. I don't know why I took so many pictures. All right, look at that. This is all the way zoomed in at 210. And I'm probably 20 feet below this or something. Chromatic aberration, obviously, on these point light sources. The fringe button a little bit, but nice and sharp as you look at it. You want to chop this down to Instagram proportions. You know, that's totally usable. Again, if you zoom in, you can kind of see, you get this fringing where the light is coming from. It's a similar situation, and I'd say this one's not as sharp, but you can still, I mean, you can make out the definition on these leaves pretty well. It looks ugly as you zoom in. This is essentially nothing. I think there was supposed to be a squirrel, so I believe there was a squirrel there. Here's this branch, and I don't know what happened with the light here. It was wide open still, but as you zoom in, you see you get, I mean, you can make out all these needles pretty nice and sharp. Once you get to the corners, it's just wide open. It's a little out of focus. Chromatic aberration goes crazy over here. Look at that. The other side, similar. Top, similar. But right in the middle, I mean, I still see some fringing there. This looks nice. So right in the middle of the image, nice and sharp. Okay, so here's this one. Kind of turned out a little bit better as far as macro. Nothing's really in focus here, so it's kind of hard to see. I mean, it looks nice. You get that kind of shadow definition. Yeah, but nothing's super sharp in this image. So there's that squirrel, his butt, it looks like. I don't know, this is a hard situation. It's focusing far away. So nothing really in focus, nothing really sharp. Not a great test case. All right, here's some macro again. Again, as you look at it far away, you can totally see what's going on. Nice and sharp, little fuzzy out towards the end. You know, middle of the image, pretty nice and usable. Like, I'm not a huge pixel peeper. I think some of this looks pretty good. And all right, this was a tricky situation. I was trying to get these lights or this deck here in focus, and then kind of see all this morning light kind of spilling through. Kinda interesting. Chromatic aberration through here, you can see that. But stuff that's far away and in focus looks decently sharp. Stuff that's on the edges, again, kind of, yeah, just kind of fuzzes out a little bit. All right, this was about 20 minutes later as I was walking back. Still, you know, it's a pleasing image. It's not at all okay, and then I stop it down. It's totally a pleasing image. It's not at all unpleasant to look at least for me. But look at that chromatic aberration as you zoom in on these point light sources. That's pretty crazy. But that's why we have Lightroom, you know? Just take that out. What happened to the image of the cup? Did I not take that? All right, and this was, you know, just this cup that was sitting here. So from probably 20 feet away or so. Again, the fringing there is pretty severe. Take that out. I set this to modern, and look at that. That's trendy. Look, I'm cool, man. That just tell a story, isn't that? Wow, that's crazy. But I mean, look at this. It's definitely decently sharp. Out of focus and unsharp in the corners. It's a bit busy, but if this is a look that you like, then you can totally work with it. I mean, this is on a, again, this is a 40-plus-year-old lens on a 10-year-old, 12-year-old camera, and not at all bad. So yeah, guys, it's just another vintage lens in my arsenal. Good kind of, I mean, it's very big, it's very heavy. I don't take this out a lot because it's kind of for specific situations. But if I'm planning on seeing nature, or any of that kind of thing, if I want to take wildlife photos, I would probably pair it with my Cosina 2x teleconverter, make it a 140 to 420, at the expense of 2 stops of light probably. But that's I mean, if you're willing to carry that around, that's pretty good. That's a compact little super zoom with a constant aperture, and innovative for its time, and available now at fairly low costs, I would imagine. Let's take a look. Let's just take a little, let's see, 40 bucks. Or, okay, so you can get the later version for 20. The 2.8 to 4, the same focal length. Or one with the case for 50. So totally available out there, cheap. And again, if you are like me, you want focal lengths to experiment with, to find what you like, to be able to be adaptable and get, you know, usable images, if not incredible images. But 90% of it is a photographer and the rest of it is the gear. It's a fun lens, it's a unique lens. Like I said, all these cameras and lenses have their own story and have their own character, and I think using vintage lenses gets you more character and more story, and it's fun, it's interesting, and it doesn't cost that much. So anyway, guys, there's that one, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.